holiday season. Yeah, I know. And they announced it in probably the most un-Sony way they possibly could.
Well, by doing a great job.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That is the... I feel like there's a lot of, sometimes people get the wrong idea about the way people like us sometimes talk about companies like Sony and other people in our position, and I feel like that is because we have seen a lot of build-up behind the scenes, a lot of different things that form a very clear picture of how these companies operate, whereas the public might not know, for example, that there's been a long-running internal feud between Sony US and Sony UK, and that there's this kind of long-standing, the assumption is that, people in this office fucking hate the people in the other office. And so it's things like that build up over the years where you're like, Sony is fucking too crazy to win all the fights and all the corporate bullshit and political bullshit that they've got built up over the years from these different divisions and different people that have been there for a very long time. There's no way they could do... And then they've seemingly... all got aligned, all got on the same page.
And the Vita would not have told you that this happened. The Vita felt like a...
Right. Yeah.
Even though we were in a post-Kutaragi era, we all thought, all right, they're going to get off their bleeding-edge high horse or find a better merging of wanting to be on the bleeding edge with what makes sense in the market. And the Vita was none of that.
No, none of that.
And that seemed like a terrible precursor for the PS4.
Yeah, you look at that and you're just like, Sony's back on its bullshit. It's just going to be the same...
I think it's nuts that it was not until about halfway through that event that we knew, or that the telltale signs were there that the right people had won the power struggle.
Yeah.
Even though...
talk is that UK ran most of that event.
Well, I'm talking about the design of the system,
sure,
the services that are being built into the system, that kind of stuff. Like we didn't hear the scuttlebutt. We didn't know until we saw what the thing was, whether the right people had gotten control or not, even though the very nature of that product required them to gain that power years ago.
Right.
The decisions that were made that led to the nature of the system had to be set in stone a long time ago for it to come out the way it did.
Or at least be built as a potential outcome alongside someone else's potential outcome, and then
and then they decided to go with this one.
What, I don't know. We don't know how some of that stuff went.
Everything, at least as far as I'm concerned, that we've seen of that thing indicates that Sony management ceded power to the right people to put that thing together.
Yeah, and you see that in
right the wrongs of the PS3.
You see that in a lot of the social aspects and stuff like that. I mean, we're talking about a company that at one point said, we're not comfortable giving out public access to trophy data because credit cards might get stolen.
Right.
Which, given what happened over the lifespan of the PlayStation 3, maybe not the worst. Maybe not the worst idea in the world. But it's a company that. You had this very clear impression through the way the PlayStation 3 was designed and the way that kind of informed the Vita and some of these little bits and pieces of stories that you hear about different games getting developed with different pieces of the internet in them and how that was, how that was received back in Japan. That, this was just a company that just didn't understand how the social internet worked, how the modern internet worked, and how the Western internet worked.
Or that the Japanese part of the company wasn't willing to give it over to the different divisions that could make that work.
Right, yes, yeah.
But it's not even, it is what you're talking about. It is a frank misunderstanding of social media, but it was also just a refusal to understand how a human being would like to use your console, It's like not building your patch infrastructure in a way that lets people get into a game 5 minutes after it starts patching, just fundamental missteps on every underpinning of that console.
Download something, then install it.
Right.
Which the Wii U still does.
Stuff just basic stuff like that.
Install, that's I feel like that's almost at its core of when you're trying to sell this to a wider audience, these people don't installing something that. What
have you seen Have you seen the thing that's going around about because they elected to their credit they elected to sell Ni no Kuni on the PSN store the day it came out, but that game is so big it has brought to light something that a lot of people didn't realize. I didn't realize it, that on the PS3 to download a game you have to have enough free storage to hold both the footprint of the installer and the installed game. And
so it's basically double the size.
Not double, but it's I want to say in that case, I forget what the ratio is. I'm sure the compression is going to be different from game.
But it's a lot.
But the point is, you you need more space free than the game lists in the store
Right.
to download and install it and be able to play your game.
Right.
And people out there with smaller PS3 hard drives were like buying this game and downloading the installer, which is like 19 gig, and not having enough room to decompress and install it, and just like being unable to play it unless they go buy a new hard drive or delete everything else on there. Like, how does that get designed? How does that get implemented? Like, people don't want to, like, that's just too much for people to use this console and enjoy it. You know?
Yeah, well, I think it shows that, this generation has been really fucking crazy. And, you look at it and you think like, oh, well, whatever, it's just the games look like better versions of the games we had before. But everything around those games has changed so dramatically over the course of the last, 6-7 years or whatever now, where, now you're bolting in all this Facebook functionality and share this on YouTube and all these patches and all this stuff. Like, no one knew that how quickly adoption of digital downloads would go. Keep in mind, like, Xbox Live Arcade, when they first launched it, was like, I don't know, you want to play Smash TV for $5?
Sure, here's Joust.
Yeah. Just like little shit like that.
Sure.
Before it became this huge juggernaut.
Like Geometry Wars was kind of a fluke.
Yeah.
And like 200 meg.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Or whatever, right?
That's fair.
Right, yeah. It's like 250 gigs or whatever. So, it's they've had to take these systems so far beyond what they were initially designed to do and just strap on and bolt on whatever functionality they could, that it's not surprising now at this point when you see shit like that, because right now everyone's thinking like, man, at some point this is no longer going to be an issue, and that point isn't in about a year or so. Around the end of this year, when we start getting new consoles that were finally designed from the ground up in a world where all that stuff exists.
Until we hit 2022, and then we're still complaining.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Anybody with less than a terabyte hard drive can't download.
Totally. Well, that'll yes, we will probably say exactly that.
Yep.
Because, that's just the nature of technology. These things are always going to be out there like a year too long.
Right.
Like,
Can't believe the PS4's hologram portal only displays in 2D. I mean, there's
or like the Wi-Fi, like it doesn't have like the fastest Wi-Fi that's on its system.
Right. Yeah. Well, what is it after? What's after N? There's a new standard that's AC. Yeah.
Which hasn't been fully ratified yet.
But
like,
at some point it will be.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not going to work with your router or your wireless router.
Or you're like, oh, I have to run an N and AC dual band because I can't fucking.
Or buy this shitty USB adapter that they charge $80 for.
If you're a serious gamer, you plug in.
Whatever, man.
Cat 6.
Plug in.
My TV
it does have an Ethernet port. It was confirmed.
It does.
My TV only takes Cat 6 now. So
what?
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Video over Cat 6.
Yeah. So, they're making a lot of smart decisions, I think, with the design and stuff. And, to be fair, like they were smart about how they covered a lot of the features of the console, and also when they got to features that were a little more ephemeral. They opened up talking about the architecture and stuff like that. I think Mark Cerny's like an inspired, amazing choice to have come out and talk about that, because, he comes from a place of video games. He doesn't come from a place of Netflix deals. He doesn't come from a place of, that sort of chest beating, like we developed all this technology ourselves.
The guy is an engineer. Like he writes code. Like he understands how these things work on a fundamental level.
They painted the picture, and most of this press conference seems like it was half designed for developers to hear and go, oh shit, Sony has figured their shit out. I should probably start developing things for their system. Like that, the whole thing felt like an ad, like a GDC talk for developers. Sure. Like, hey, you should make stuff for our system.
And I felt like that was exciting for us by proxy, purely because it hopefully will lead to more and better games on that platform.
Right.
Even if we're not the ones making them, hearing that stuff, it's like, oh shit.
It'll be easy to develop for.
Yeah, the people
architecture that people understand.
Right. Like the people who potentially make awesome stuff are now going to make it on a PlayStation.
Yeah. It was interesting to hear just them come out and say, because it's like, whatever, the specs have been out there for a pretty long time, pretty reliable, that they were going to make the change to
except for
this
the
x86 stuff. Yeah, I guess the memory that was kind of the last minute, like
the doubling of the memory. Everybody thought it was going to
like, haha, surprise, let's make this thing expensive.
Yeah.
But that's Durango's in the same boat, more or less, in terms of architecture.
Yeah.
So we kind of have known
two
for a
machines
while
are going to be fairly comparable. Yeah, it sounds like.
So like that's not necessarily the big kind of aha thing for me. It was like the way they're trying, the way they say they're going to try to use the Gaikai stuff. I guess is probably the right way to phrase that, because it's like when David Perry got out there, it became much more like, this is what we'd like to do.
Real speculative, like pie in the sky kind of stuff.
Because, it's like when it comes down to it, like that technology has such bandwidth requirements that it's not up to them whether those features work. It's up to, North American broadband penetration and the average speed and, just broadband around the world. Like, am I going to have a fast enough connection to realistically jump into someone else's game and control it for a few minutes? Like, I don't know.
It's like the equivalent, like the network equivalent of a target render.
Yeah, right.
Kind of, yeah.
Are they going to
look at all this fancy stuff we can do?
Yeah.
In theory,
this will all work. But
like other bandwidth requirements that come on along with these machines as well. Like these features will only work if X, Y, and Z is capable with your network.
And it's
probably
and the math is even fuzzier than that, because even if you say like requires a 20 megabit internet connection, like you could have that on like. That could be what's on your Comcast statement, but you might not be getting anywhere near that based on like 8 other factors.
Or you could have the speed, but not the latency.
Right. Like there are too many variables for anybody to depend on.
Like someone out there on satellite internet is just looking at this going like, well, I'm never going to be able to do that. Because that isn't how this works.
Sure. What did exactly? I don't remember what Perry said. Like, how did they pitch it? Was it just for here's the wide legacy of PlayStation library titles? Like, it's all old stuff, or were they
like a
saying,
PlayStation Cloud type stuff? They kept it really non-specific.
Okay. So it's not just backwards compatibility. It's like
anything it could be demos. It could be.
Oh, and like the jumping into people's games.
Right, and the social aspects where that probably makes the most sense, because once you get into running games out of the cloud and once you get into running demos out of the cloud over the Gaikai, over like a video stream, like on live, you need to have some sort of massive server infrastructure somewhere that is capable of running that stuff one-to-one. Like, okay, I need to have a server that can run this PlayStation 4 game, and then in order to stream it out to someone.
Right.
If everyone in the world says, I want to play a demo right now, are they going to have the computing capacity to actually back that up? Probably not.
Do you get into a World of Warcraft style queue?
Right.
You watch numbers tick down until you can play the game?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they have to spin up data centers?
Yeah, you're either going to need a dedicated box that it'll run on, or they'll have to virtualize it in some way.
Yeah, do they have Blade servers that would be able to emulate PlayStation 3 games in quantity?
Right.
Like that aspect of it. It's fucking crazy.
Mind-blowing. Like, I'm sure for somebody that is a really delightful engineering challenge to make that work.
Right.
But it also just sounds like a horrible nightmare.
And it's why they're smart to... I mean, they avoided falling into, like, the Killzone 2 hole on this feature by not just coming out and saying, like, too much about, here's what you're going to be able to play out of the cloud.
Yeah.
By being very fuzzy about that stuff, it gives them a lot of wiggle room, because I think a lot of that stuff is some of the hardest...
Maybe not determined either.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not determined. Some of it will not be up to them to determine, because of just the nature of internet speed and stuff like that, and it's in a lot of ways the hardest problem that they will have to solve.
And given their track record with the PS3, makes me the most worried about their ability to pull it off.
Right,
they're biting off a lot.
Yeah,
and have not shown. They never fixed PSN network speeds, like download speeds.
Yeah,
either. And that's not something that I feel like you punt to the next generation. Like, we'll fix it then.
Yeah.
Well, they never gave a satisfying explanation for why it is different for different people.
You're right.
Have never really acknowledged it as a problem. And I guess they kind of did in the press conference. They kept Doug Perry kept saying fast.
Yeah.
Like specifically that phrase was used.
The Guinness World Record for the fastest data center, or whatever.
Which I feel like maybe that's a tacit acknowledgement that we weren't getting this right before, but. And they're starting from scratch, and there's all sorts of reasons why that's a good thing. You don't come out of PS3 feeling like if there's a company that's going to nail network features, it's Sony. Like, it's Microsoft that I feel is going to nail that stuff.
I'm willing to give them some benefit of the doubt because, for one thing, we don't know what the Gaikai acquisition got them in terms of network engineers and that kind of stuff. Who knows what technology came along with that?
Yeah.
And I agree with you on the thing about punting the quality of the network until you make a new console. From a consumer-facing standpoint, that sucks ass, but who knows what the technical ramifications of that are? Maybe their hands just were kind of tied on that until they had a whole new thing.
The thing I would give them some small benefit of the doubt on is they clearly know they fucked it up.
Right.
Yeah.
They clearly know that they need to fix it.
Well, they're putting that whole other chip in there, right? Just for
for background download processing.
We know this was such a problem that we put a whole other chip on the motherboard.
Right. That's a pretty good acknowledgement that
So it's at the very least you can come away from that thing saying they are clearly aware that this is an unacceptable problem for their platform.
And likewise, Sony all but said right up front, like, we know the cell was a mistake. Like, we know we can't do that again.
Yeah.
Here you go, x86. You know how that works.
But you're going to get other x86 processors that are in your washing machine and your refrigerator, and if you have all those in tandem, it'll digitally age your content in the locker.
Buy a Wi-Fi dishwasher.
Yeah.
There has to be one. No, I'm saying, like, whatever.
No, there is. There is. But it's the one that I was looking at, it only connects back. It's like a Big Brother dishwasher. It only connects back to the makers of the dishwasher.
Oh, fuck that.
To say, hey, it's broken.
That is
and
bullshit.
then they call you to schedule a service appointment.
That's disgusting.
There's no like customizable app or anything.
Not that I saw. It didn't
change
look
the
like
sound.
Didn't look like it would post to Twitter. Like, that's what I want, is the Twitter dishwasher.
Don't let no middleman come between you and your appliances.
I'm so clean right now. So the thing about the Sony press conference that I really enjoyed, they said stuff I didn't expect, which was great. That's always fun, right? But then there were things in there that are probably next generation no-brainers that they get to then take credit for because they were out first. Like the suspend feature, which I think is great.
Oh, that's so great.
It's such a great feature, but it's probably also something that Microsoft will have. And like one of those things that's like, we've been talking about this for years. It's one of those hardware things that we could do now, but then Sony gets to get out there first and be like,
now everybody feels like they thought of it.
That was our idea. And like the being able to start a demo while it's downloading, I feel like it's just a next-gen thing that everybody will probably have.
It's all stuff that exists on other platforms already.
And it's like, Sony can be like, we said it first.
But still, the idea of it being in a console is like super exciting.
Because like, how do you get up there as Microsoft as a bullet point and be like, and we'll have suspended play?
And everybody's like,
whatever. That's
of
old
course,
news.
of course you will, Microsoft.
Start a demo with only like half of it download. Whatever. That's Sony's got that. Show me something new. Show me the good stuff.
Yeah.
So I was pretty happy for them to be able to be like, good for you getting out there first, doing a great press conference, and kind of taking ownership of these things that are probably no brainers.
Yeah, that should come standard.
Yeah,
in
that
this
we're
day
up
and age.
to. Here.
Sure.
So good on them. I'm happy for them.
I think the backwards compatibility thing is a real bummer, and maybe that's something where the Gaikai stuff could get into, and it's
I was shocked at the backlash.
I think I think part of our jobs, I think, feeds into that a little bit, where we are always motivated and have access to everything and what's always coming forward. Like, there are a lot of people that's not true for, and a lot of people that, like, Rising is a good candidate for, like, you and me, we're going to play that once.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are going to play that a dozen times and get a lot more out of it. And
Sure.
I feel like our jobs are fundamentally opposed to what backwards compatibility is supposed to do.
Right.
Which is, like, enable those libraries for people who, that $60, they really ring it out.
That's a feeture for parents. Like, ultimately, that feature has always been, even on the 360, I think they all but came out and said, like, they needed to have something so when parents said, what do you mean I got to buy all the discs again, too? That they could say, no, it'll work. So it's like, he's already got 100 of these games. What do I got to have a response to that?
That's all perfectly fine. I totally understand why people want it.
Yeah.
But the technical reality of making it happen, I think, is what people are discounting in this.
Totally,
and especially now.
Exactly.
Now more than
ever.
It's
a full architecture change. Yeah. It's all but impossible unless they use the streaming stuff to make it happen.
Like, that is the one route to getting that stuff back.
My thing, though, is like I want to stay to a point. I think consoles kind of have to get to a point where, like Steam, you look at a fat list of games and you go, I've got all these games. And it's the digital stuff that breaks it. Even though it's not that different in the grand scheme of things, whether I'm downloading it or whether I'm putting it in the drive, the digital stuff means I have to now count on Sony and potentially Microsoft to run their network in perpetuity. To not shut off Xbox Live for the Xbox 360 or PSN for the PlayStation 3 so that I can always get to my purchases. If my PlayStation 3 blows up and breaks, I need to be able to know that I can go get a used PS3 and still play all that stuff. Because if I've spent all this time building this digital library and it goes away, why would I ever digitally buy a game again?
Sure. But that onus is on them regardless of what kind of box is under your TV.
Yeah.
Like, whether you have drug out your old PS3 and hooked it up to play some stuff, or the PS4 can run those games. Like, either way, they shoulder the responsibility for making sure that still works.
Yeah, and I wish that they would get out in front of, like that would have been smart for them. I think it's something Microsoft should do, is get out in front, especially Microsoft, is when they start addressing this stuff, get out and say, we have zero plans to shut down Xbox Live on the 360. In fact, if in the event that, because they had to shut it down on the original Xbox, in the event that we have to make serious architectural changes to our network, we guarantee that this network will remain up for purchasing or for downloading your past purchases.
Right. You're right that they could allay everybody's fears in like 10 seconds of saying stuff like that. It's almost kind of surprising they haven't yet, although Microsoft hasn't had the venue for it yet.
Right. And I think with Sony, they're probably still cooking something up where I have to imagine that one of the things you would get out of whatever they do with their PlayStation Cloud stuff would be access to your PlayStation 3 digital purchases. Whether that's how you want to play them or not, no. Think about some of those games. I don't give a fuck how low the latency gets on your video stream. I'm going to download a fighting game and play it that way. Right. No. We're talking about
some genres don't.
Games
some genres, but like Journey, I could probably play Journey just fine.
Play Journey.
Yeah. That game doesn't demand a lot of timing.
And there is a fundamental difference between, even if it's irrational, physical and digital purchases.
Yeah.
That's on that hard drive, that's on that machine, it is tied to an account. I'm sorry that you picked a fucked up architecture the last time around, but sorry, not my problem.
Yeah.
You took my money.
Right.
And, every other device that people purchase that aren't these game consoles doesn't treat their material on that device that way. And video games have gotten away with it. What? All my iPad purchases go over.
Phones absolutely do.
But for how long?
A lot longer than I have confidence that all these apps on my phone, I can probably still use this on an Apple device 6 years from now.
All right. I guess that has changed. I'm more talking about kind of pre-iPhone era phones. All those games are lost to time.
Sure.
In a lot of cases, if you still have that phone, because I actually still have a couple of phones, you can't run the games.
But I think
can't run Doom RPG on this old ass Verizon phone because it hits a server that's no longer there.
Right. But I think that shift has happened with other devices with digital content that is not. Maybe we'll say, that's an opportunity where backwards compatibility doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of selling machines. But if Microsoft, that can be one of those things that if they can somehow guarantee a lot of compatibility because the architecture is not as big of a technological leap for them, they can at least guarantee that in digital. That gives them a big punching bag against Sony.
Yeah,
but they can't So I posed this question on Twitter. I was talking to people, just kind of saying, "Hey, what would you pay for backwards compatibility? What does it mean to you?" Blah blah blah. And the number of people that came out and said exactly this, I don't care about the disc games as long as the downloads work. They're both the same software that run on the same hardware. I don't It's almost not. It's almost not a question of backwards compatibility,
and it's not. You're right.
Issues.
It's not. It's the concern that you're no longer going to be able to get to things that you purchase.
Right, but that is not backwards compatibility. That is a maintenance of ongoing service.
Yeah.
But do you feel like being able to store that and not have to connect to play that game or anything like that, would that alleviate some of your? If they were just like, hey, we're going to turn this off, so download everything.
They definitely need to come out and address that issue. Valve has done that. Valve has said, if, God forbid, the sky falls and Valve goes away, we will throw a switch that, they're not going to make every game that was ever on Steam free to everybody, but, they have said,
you'll have access.
We will make it so that you can have all of the games you've ever bought, in perpetuity. They didn't say how they would do it.
Well, I'm saying, if Xbox Live were hey, we got to switch this off.
I would prefer that I did not have to be the keeper of that data for all time.
Do you think that's unreasonable, considering that it's the same? For a DVD, if your if your game breaks, that's it.
Right.
So if you're
you're right. Maybe that's an unreasonable thing to want, and maybe that would be enough. But am I going to have a hard drive full of these games that are then suddenly hard to replace? What happens if that hard drive dies? Am I totally screwed?
Yeah.
Is there a way for me to get someone else's copy of the game, and because I've been licensed to use it too, I can still play it?
It's weird. I don't know where I fall on this in terms of how much responsibility. If I bought a copy of Mass Effect 3 digitally from Xbox, right, versus the DVD I have, should I be able to always download that from Microsoft versus would they ever replace my scratched, DVD or something like that? It's a new thing. It's something that's cropped up, like we were talking about earlier, in this generation. So I'm not really sure where I fall on that. Should I be able to? Did I license the do I have ownership of this? Am I licensing the right to play it? You've asked me to manage space Microsoft in the with the thought that I can always download these things and delete games and stuff like that. It's a weird one.
It's just one of those things where I think, game preservation gets difficult, and you end up in this situation where 20 years out or something like that, the only people playing Xbox 360 games are going to be people playing pirated copies of it, because it'll be damn near impossible to maintain that lineage of ownership and the server structure and all that sort of stuff.
And that's the industry fucking up in terms of thinking about its historical legacy.
Yeah.
Like, it's unfortunate and I think damning in the long run that there'll be just these moments where things are just cut off unless people are willing to participate in a gray area that the industry publicly has to say is wrong and illegal and you could go to jail, but is the only way to have any sort of historical context for the industry.
The number of developers,
that's crazy.
The number of developers of arcade games and a lot of early stuff that are just straight up like, yeah, it's pretty cool that I can go back and play all my old games and just easily download all these ROMs. Like, I'm not making any money off it, but I wouldn't be anyway. It's just great that this stuff is out there. Whatever, everyone has to draw their own personal lines, but I sleep better at night knowing that there are people out there, and it's not all of them.
On that wall.
Yeah, that there are people that are at least with it enough to be like, hey, I made my money off that game when it was out. Obviously, it's not going to be this big thing, so great. It's awesome that people are able to still find and enjoy this thing I made.
I'm with you. There is it's a tough line though, right? Like,
totally.
How old is old enough, and where does that bar go? Is like Nintendo stuff or like arcade stuff? Like, does that have to be hardware based?
I think you end up in a lot of situations now where increasingly that stuff is being sold back to us. But through the virtual console, through all that other stuff.
So,
I mean, the shitty part is you want to get to the root of it, it's like the American copyright system.
Yeah, totally.
If copyrights lapsed and Disney hadn't, it's always like the Disney clause. If stuff went into this period where others could just repackage it and put it out there, like we could have this outside body that was doing historical markers for games as things went into the open market and the copyrights lapsed, but they don't, and they're not going to happen in our lifetime.
Well, instead, people very much are doing that. They're just not out there selling that stuff. Like, there are still people out there that are very dedicated to, so when PlayStation 1 piracy was all the rage, there were people transferring, ISO dumps of discs back and forth and all that other stuff, TurboGrafx games, like that sort of stuff. You'd find all that stuff on the internet. But now there are people going back and saying, like, these discs are not pure enough. Like, we want to redump the originals, and because we've gotten that much better at conserving, at preserving all of the data on a disc down to, a much more
like junk data and all this.
Yeah. That we want to make sure we get those, and it's still not perfect because it's not going to be the original disc because the way the copy protection was built in the first place. But there are people out there that care, hobbyists that are out there doing a lot of that work, even though they are technically outside the law when they're doing it. So regardless of how it ends up, and it's shitty that it has to be this way, but regardless of how it ends up, you will always be able to find a way to play that stuff.
Yeah, and
I think it's shitty from an abstract philosophical perspective, but I mean, like, there is no money to be made there, so like, I don't,
I think you're right, but I think that the people, the copyright holders would argue differently, and I think we don't need to look too much further than like all these fucking God of War HD collections and all these, all these HD collections and all this other stuff.
Or
to
like
see what they're going to try, or Game Room and Capcom Arcade Cabinet and stuff like. Like, look, I love Speed Rumbler, and I'm happy that there's a legal way for me to play Speed Rumbler, or there will be in a few weeks when it comes out, or a week or two. But who the fuck's going to pay for Speed Rumbler?
And that's the thing; the avenues are so like it's not good. Because I agree that they should provide a legal avenue for you to go play Speed Rumbler. But the alternative is way too easy, and it's way more universal. Like, you can download that on your PC for about half a second, and then you'll own that, not on that console. You'll have it on a PC. You'll bring it with you wherever you go.
Play it on Android devices.
Play it anywhere you want to go.
All kinds of weird places.
Or you're going to pay a couple of bucks on this one console to, it's just...
There's plenty of money to be made. It's just the way the video game industry across multiple platforms and the way licenses are held, how copyrights are held.
Yeah.
It's just...
It's not
in order to build. It's not like you can just build a Netflix for games that has all of this old stuff.
Right. I mean, otherwise, like, fucking Game Tap would still be around.
Right.
Make no mistake, though, the desire to sell a few HD collections is not the reason PS4 is not backwards compatible.
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
it is not an insignificant technical challenge to make that stuff work on.
It's like the modern Sega Saturn, basically.
Well, more
like,
than
will the
that,
cell processor
PS3
ever?
That's not the point. It's not about the idiosyncrasies of the cell. It is about like when you take an old machine that is nothing like the new machine.
Right.
You either keep making that hardware and embed it in the new machine,
which is what the PS2 did,
right,
for PS1 games.
Which, like, my understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that backwards compatibility as a feature in video game consoles was a happy accident because they put the CPU for the PlayStation 1 in the PS2 to act as an I/O controller of some kind, and they were like, well, shit, it's already there, so we can drop it to some kind of compatibility mode, and it'll run these games.
Yeah.
But every successive generation of consoles has gotten an order of magnitude more complex and more expensive to make, and like you can't just keep making these chips and putting them in these new consoles just to ensure, like, that's a feature that everybody says they want, but nobody's going to want to pay the $150 or $200 extra on top of this console to get it, you know?
Right.
Like, I did a lot of looking into this stuff. Like, Sony does not own the fabrication of the Cell and RSX anymore. They still have to outsource that stuff out, and that would cost a whole lot of money to make that stuff and keep putting it in the PS4 to make those games run. Like, it's just not feasible.
Yeah, and the majority of consumers don't necessarily want it.
Right.
It's a nice-to-have feature, and I think
it's great to have if you can make it work, but, like, if people want the consoles to be cheap and continue to be complex and capable, then they can't also have that. You know, it's like you got to pick any two, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like you could add a bunch of extra money on, and they can add that stuff in, or they can keep the price down and keep it from collapsing in on itself and have to, like, grudgingly exclude that feature.
Yeah, it's whatever. I own a lot of old consoles and a lot of games for those old consoles, so like I get it on that front. For me, it is. I think for a lot of people, it is that digital hang up that people are conflating with backwards compatibility.
Right. Yeah, I feel like
saying, like, what about my
right?
What about all this legacy content? Like, what does this mean for me?
Right. And you would hope they will get out there at some point in the near future and say, hey, here's how it's going to be as we retire the PS3, as these consoles reach their ends of lives.
Yeah.
This is how this will be maintained on an ongoing basis.
Right. And I hope they do the right thing there.
Sure.
You know, there's a you know.
And assuming they do, then you're back to the exact same place you're at with physical, like, disc and cartridge games, which is just, you know, hang on to the old system.
Right.
What if they just knock the DRM off of that stuff at some point and they're like, fuck it. Like, if you got it, you might have it. Like, here's a copy of this that, like, once you have this copy, you can play it anywhere on any 360.
Well, I don't think that's...
I don't think they'll do it.
Yeah.
But, like...
I don't think they'll do it. Someone will. Someone already has.
But as you know, when we switched over from tape to digital media, just in production, right?
Yeah,
it was one of those things that was at first liberating and then oppressive in the how much. My God, we need to keep these terabyte drives.
How many
forever?
How many drives do we go through a month?
Yeah, at least like 2 or 3 terabytes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, shit. We got rid of tape stock. But now I just have boxes full of terabyte drives, right? So like that you need to hold on to forever, and they're going to fail, and they're going to, do whatever. So you have to have clones of those terabyte drives.
Couldn't we just send those up somewhere? Shouldn't that live in the cloud?
It could be if it didn't
what's
take
the new
like,
Amazon service?
If it didn't take like a week to upload one drive.
Well, just hook that drive up to an internet port somewhere, change it out once a week until we're done.
That's what we tried doing. It was unfortunate that the S3 service would not take files over 5.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
5 gigabytes. So yeah, you can do that if you want to have. And Glacier is great if you want to have long-term storage, but not readily accessible access to that stuff. So I just imagine, and it might not be this generation, but at some point you have servers that are so crowded with all this digital media that what the fuck do you do with it? Like, at some point, don't you have to just say, like, we can't host this anymore? Like, this is too. All of Nevada has become a data center. like, we can't do this.
Quarantine.
Well, there are still advances in technology and advances in storage. I mean, eventually we'll get off of hard drives onto SSDs, and eventually we'll get off of SSDs onto fucking holograms, and creepy. Come out to Crystal Grippers Inc. and we'll store all your data. And if you put your arm near it, it tingles.
I want to see a quantum computer in operation before I die. I think that's all I care about.
Yeah, sure.
Stuff like that is so insane.
At some point, the entire library of the 360 will fit on something that is the size of a thumb drive, right? And it'll be like that. Yeah. But like,
it'll fit on an SD card that you plug into a thing that is your phone, and it'll through some weird hack thing.
But at that point, I totally feel like somebody, and maybe it will be me, will say, I've got the entire 360 library on this thumb drive. That's kind of awesome. I can plug it into my space PC and I can play any 360. Is that legal? What? I don't. I own.
I mean, as of right now, what is the number one deterrent to hacking and pirating on a 360? It's not getting banned off Live, right?
Yeah.
So,
you'd like to think it was the moral.
Well, let's be realistic.
End of it.
Let's be realistic here.
Well,
but
sure.
I mean, I'm not.
Also, right now, there's an easy avenue to get any of those games. Like, you can get them used, you can get them new. Like, for 360 stuff, it's not hard to go find a 360 game.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and condone anyone's future course of action, but at some point, if 360 gets busted wide open, 10, 15 years from now, Microsoft isn't going to give a shit anymore. You're certainly not going to get banned from a non-existent 360 version of Xbox Live.
But I just feel like
won't it turn into the MAME situation of just like that stuff just out there?
I suppose it will.
And I feel like at that point, computers will be fast enough and strong enough to brute force emulation.
And that's the other thing.
Right?
That's the other thing. I mean, that is the other. There's put the cell in the PS4. There is get the Gaikai shit working, and the other option is what they did with the 360, which is try to emulate it. But clearly, that's not going to work with something as
at least not right now.
Well, probably not on the PS4. Like it's highly, definitely highly doubt
the PS4 is not powerful enough to emulate a PS3 the cell processor.
Exactly. They tried it on the 360 and it was terrible.
Yeah,
it's like the worst backwards compatibility that's ever been conceived.
It's pretty bad.
They still even support that whitelist of games, or is that?
Well, those are supported in perpetuity because once you get it working, it just works. But they stopped.
Yeah, they're not adding new profiles to make that work better.
They only did a few dozen games, right?
But at the same time, running PlayStation 1 games with local hardware-based, your software-based emulation, totally doable. PlayStation 2 games,
sure.
up there too.
I mean,
so if they wanted to run PS1 and PS2 games on a PS4, I bet they could pull it off.
You're probably right. PS1,
absolutely,
for sure, and fully in software.
Yeah.
But I mean, PS3 runs every PS1 game off the shelf, like you just stick a game in there and it works. I wonder.
I don't know. Do they still have that chip in there?
Or maybe the logic from the PS1 CPU has just been integrated into one of the chips on the PS3 board.
I don't know.
So on the PlayStation Network, the PS1 Classics, that's not emulated. That's running off of
we don't know
hardware.
That's what we were just talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't know.
And do they sell PS2 games through the store?
They don't.
And only PS2 games run on. Or they only run on the
early
first.
PS2.
Right.
Well, there was that second round, like the 80 gig PS3 did some PS2 games, right? Didn't they go to some kind of hybrid, partial software?
You might be
emulation,
right. Yeah.
And then they just dropped it entirely.
I think you're
a little bit after that.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, PlayStation 4. And they announced a bunch of games. I don't know. That stuff all looks fine. There was no one game there that I was like, oh man, I got to have this, but they all looked pretty good. It was more just the notion of the system and what it means for developers.
Confidence. It was a good confidence booster for me. You guys are doing a good job.
Yeah,
good job, Sony.
Sure. But I thought it was interesting that even the games where they're making sequels to existing franchises, stuff like Killzone and Infamous specifically. They're not putting numbers on them. They're telling different stories.
Yeah.
It's not just here's the next Infamous game. It's here's an Infamous side story. Here's a Killzone side story.
Right.
That lets them hopefully change it up more than you would get out of the average sequel.
Also, as much as we groan and maybe rightfully so to some extent about sequels out of the gate,
yeah,
it's not like developers have had enough time with this new hardware to really start figuring out what the new stuff is they can do with it.
Also, I think that there's no winning when it comes to your launch rollout of announcing what games are coming to your console. Because if you announce a bunch of new IPs, then everyone's like, "What?
Right?
What is this shit? We don't even know. Maybe it's good."
I think people get excited about new stuff.
Well,
I can get excited about a brand new shooter franchise from Guerrilla Games. I roll my eyes at a brand new Killzone from Guerrilla Games.
Again, though,
I think theoretically, though, there are people that like Killzone.
Well,
and I think for those people, it's cool.
Sure.
Again, though, I think it's forgivable because game design is such an iterative process that right now all they know how to do is make another Killzone game, right?
Sure.
They haven't had enough time with this thing to say, oh, wait, what if we did the AI like this?
What if they did it?
Well, stuff like Assassin's Creed came out 2 years after the 360 shipped, and I always look at that as wow, there is a really crazy crowd system that you never saw on the old consoles. There's them doing something more than just better shaders on the same kind of game.
I feel like I don't want to be lied to at the PS3 press conference, but I don't when they showed Knack, which seems like it's a cutesy enough, whimsical, fun platform that I'll probably enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have chosen that as the first thing to show off what that machine can do, even if I got what they were trying to do from the the particle perspective and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you're selling me on the new device, it's probably going to be pretty expensive if I'm not going to be one of those guys that maybe buys into if they go down this path of, contract services like with phones and stuff. I want to be sold a little bit on the dream. I want to be like, the appropriate way to do it is to show a little more of your hand than you actually have to sell people on like what this is why you need it.
You got to be real careful with that though.
You're
kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I think
because they did that with Killzone 2, and look what it got.
And I agree. So Sony is not in a position to do that.
Yeah.
I think Sony
that
of all the companies has had to be the most careful.
Like, keep in mind, it's February. They still have time to do what you're talking about.
Right.
And I think that they will probably get there. I mean, there's still studios that are unaccounted for in terms of what they're working on.
Yeah. E3 is a much more. It's going to be E3 is going to be very software driven, which is really exciting.
Totally.
Because that's what at the end, like.
And most of it should be playable at that point too. If we're talking about stuff that's shipping end of the year,
so
it'll be damn near close.
They gave a quote saying you'll be able to play the system at E3. Didn't they?
I
think that, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know that they did, but yeah,
I think I saw some outlet. Of course. I think I saw saying that.
Yeah.
Both those machines are going to be playable.
Yeah.
What I want to see out of the Sony press conference at E3 is like podium rises out of the stage with like a drape on top of it. Fucking Jack Tretton walks out and just whips it off. There's the PS4. And then it's an hour of games.
I don't know if it'll be Jack Tretton, but I think you'll see that.
Yeah.
I think
like no words. Like you don't need any banner, no bullshit. Just like let the console appear as if from heaven.
I bet
show a bunch of video games.
I bet it's
that's your press conference.
Either one of the first slides or a podium.
Just get out of the way because the box is so irrelevant at this point. Like, I don't care what the PS4 looks like.
I very much care, but it's not something that I didn't come away from that thing going like, why didn't there?
Yeah,
because they spent so much time saying stuff that you would never have expected them to say and do at their initial. I thought most of what we were going to get was here's the look of the box.
Right.
I think
a slideshow with specs.
We weren't even 100% sure that there were going to be games at this thing.
Right. I think I could probably speak for Jeff as well as myself in saying that I'm really bummed we didn't get to see it from like an abstract history of video games perspective.
Yeah, sure,
I'd love knowing what design went into a console and how it's going to like look in the pantheon of consoles over time.
It reflects a certain philosophy that goes into the rest of the machine, like the Xbox 360 or the Wii, like those represented the philosophy behind a lot of the rest of the design.
I want to know if it's like an Inhale or not.
Yeah, right. But I think that when it comes down to representing their philosophy, or at least what they're trying to say, with the way that press conference went, you get Mark Cerny out there. You get people that have deep ties to the legacy of video games as we know them, and then are also you're also flexible enough to say, and also here's Jonathan Blow. It's fucking crazy. Like that press conference was fucking insane.
It was a strong push.
It was really fucking exciting to see that stuff because they were so all over the place. Just in terms of being focused on games of all types, being open to developers of all stripes, and being able to say like, hey, we got this guy, and we're putting him on stage at the thing. Like, who could have possibly guessed that Jonathan Blow would have been on stage at the same event where they unveiled the PlayStation 4? Stuff like that says more about Sony and where they're at, and at least what the image that they are attempting to convey, both to consumers, but I think more importantly to developers. Like there was very much, you saw like Nick Sutner and like guys on Twitter that were very much like, hey, you want to self-publish with PlayStation? Fucking get a hold of me.
Like click this link.
Like let's do it.
Yeah.
Click this fucking button. Let's get to work.
Yeah.
Like they're very much trying to turn around the last generation's problems with developer relations. And what the system had become known for is this incredibly difficult to develop for mess.
And the Blow appearance, you could very cynically look at that and be like, they gave him $50,000 and now he's here and it'll come out like a month early or something. But he put up that blog post on, I think it was on Friday, like 2 days after the event, that was super illuminating about why he's on that platform. And he straight up said, I haven't even been briefed on the Durango yet, and I have a PS4 dev kit. Like it's purely the Witness is purely a PS4 like early console exclusive because Sony reached out to him and like supported him and really liked the game. Like they didn't pay him for it.
And I feel like like there were developers out there at that thing. I managed to talk to a few of them, and I feel like we've all kind of talked to developers relatively recently, and it seems like that's kind of been the story if it's not that, then it's the opposite on the other side of like, oh, Sony's been really easy to work with. They're really, they're really being proactive about wanting to work with us. Whereas you don't hear that out of Microsoft. You hear the opposite. So that's kind of the thing is, this is very much what we thought of Sony going into the PlayStation 3 was like, oh, look at these, they're coming off the PS2, like they're going to be as difficult to work with as possible. Their system's hard to develop for, and they're on a very, very high horse right now.
I mean, they were even presenting that arrogance to the consumer. You know? It's like, here's this $600 machine. Right. Go get another job.
Meanwhile, Microsoft had cut its generation off early because no one wanted the original Xbox, and they were fucking scrappy as hell.
Yeah.
And they had to fight for every single developer they got, and they didn't get any out of Japan because why would they? And because they were so hungry, because they were willing to spend money in the right places, they took the generation.
Yeah, like that's what got them Gears of War a year after that machine shipped.
Yeah, they made a lot of really smart, really key deals. And the story is yet to be told, but like the early look at it, you could very much see it going the exact opposite way this time, for the exact same reasons why it went that way last time. And all that's exciting. Like all I really want out of this is a fucking fight.
Yeah.
Well, because we all win. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh yeah.
Like,
it's not my money.
Yeah, let them try to outspend each other for exclusives. Let them try to fucking outdevelop each other and do all this stuff. Like let's.
Unless there are a great exclusive for each system, then I'm just spending so much money.
Yeah.
Then it's like I gotta buy everything. It was so nice to just have a totally vanilla just play it on the best system. You can only have to buy it once. What if there's like all this console exclusive content?
That's the kind of.
I mean, they announced Destiny as a PS4 exclusive as far as like add-on. There would be some exclusive content. It wasn't necessarily you'll get it here first. It might just be you can only get some of this stuff here. But like that stuff never.
I know, but what if it's different this time? What if it is?
That's kind of the big question, right?
What if that stereoscopic camera is amazing and you can only do things on the PS4?
Well, the onus is on them to differentiate at that level because the two machines are going to be so similar in terms of hardware this time,
I don't know. What if you can Gaikai in Marathon while I'm playing Destiny?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, they have to...
On a console.
Like, the experiences in terms of, like, multi-platform games are probably going to be pretty damn similar.
In Destiny, you walk up to a computer terminal, and then you can stream and Marathon and play that within Destiny.
There's a terminal in there, you hit on that, and then it's just like, I don't know, you want to play Ratchet and Clank? And you're like, not really? Sure, fine.
Sure, I'll play anything I want.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. You think Microsoft will have a streaming solution?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like
they'll have parity?
Like that's where the puck is going.
Well, all the speculation is when everybody was like, why did they go with Ustream? Like, the presumption is that Microsoft already got Twitch. Locked up.
Ustream, I think, is also has a bigger presence in Japan.
I read that, but it didn't seem like it's overwhelmingly so to the point that they would go with. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not.
Who knows?
They have been for what it's worth, PlayStation has been streaming their stuff on Ustream for years.
Yeah.
So sure. I don't know what their relationship is like, but it seems like they already had one.
Yeah, you might be right. I feel like you'd have to have your head in the sand in this country to not know how ascendant Twitch is as far as that stuff goes. Like, you kind of
should probably state at this point, CBS is a minority investor in Twitch. I think that's the case.
That's right. So we can't cover Microsoft anymore.
I remember hearing that was the case.
There's definitely a deal or something.
Strike the last thing I said.
There's some sort of deal in there.
Yeah.
But
whatever. I mean,
get that out there. Disclosure.
Sure. I mean, everybody's streaming on Twitch. Like, that's just kind of the way it is right now.
Especially for games. Absolutely.
But who knows? Like, I mean,
sometimes the old Justin TV, which I think they're separate companies. But the Justin TV app doesn't work, and I have to use the Ustream app on my phone a lot of the time.
Sure,
that app is busted.
So that camera thing,
did
they say that's coming with the console? Or did they just said that?
They said they haven't decided.
Okay, if they'll pack it in or not.
They said they are not talking about what's in or not in the box yet.
I thought the press release did say the camera was included.
Yeah, like camera bar, that weird looking thing.
No, that they haven't said one way or the other. They'll probably look at reception, see what final cost is going to be.
I'm curious to know.
They want adaption. You put it in the box.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of the.
And Microsoft is going to put a Kinect in that box. So if you want those games that are coming out there on that Kinect
with the same features,
you put that in the box.
Have they said one way or the other if that camera will work without any sort of guidance device like a controller or a Move?
I don't think they did.
Didn't Sony refer to it as depth sensing?
He did.
Yeah. So it should then, right?
Yeah, I would think, but I guess I guess depth sensing would imply some sort of infrared or
right.
But they had all that stuff.
I bet that's a patent minefield for them.
Like, yeah, I bet so too. There was that depth sensing stuff and the mocap stuff that people were doing with just like 2 or 3 PlayStation eyes. Remember seeing that stuff?
Wait, I got it. Microsoft and Sony did swap. Sony gave Microsoft Blu-ray. Microsoft gave Sony
It's a trade.
Yeah,
it's just a handshake.
Like
deal.
that. Actually, that kind of thing more or less happens. I mean, like
yeah, but that's
the
Sony
mobile,
Entertainment.
the mobile device
right?
industry is so rife with litigation.
Yeah.
Like everybody is licensing everybody else's patents.
Sure.
Who knows? I'm kind of joking, but
I think Microsoft would have gotten the better end of the deal on that one.
Oh, Blu-ray. Oh, I don't know. Kinect's pretty popular.
We're pretty good on this. Have you played Steel Battalion? No? Oh, well, it's great.
You're gonna
It
love
works. It works.
Well, how many Blu-rays have you sold? Yeah, I don't know.
Is Space Jam out on Blu-ray? It is. Oh, well, that's all right.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting generation, this one, especially for the digital stuff, since this is the first all digital.
Yeah,
time we're coming out.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
They should have solved that stuff.
Yeah.
They should be encountering new problems in 5 years.
What will they be?
Millennials.
It's the part where
if I knew them, I would leave this company and go make the solution.
After
for
the nuclear attack, no one will have time to play video games, and we're too busy.
Right. Make a bug-out capable PS4.
Too busy fighting giant rats.
I don't know.
I spent all weekend reading about asteroid impacts.
Yeah, after that one in Russia.
I don't think that your PSN downloads are going to survive a giant impact.
What?
I'm sorry to break it to you.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Why would I download anything?
Why would I do anything?
Yeah.
That one slipped through, right? It was like went under the radar. That one that like broke up over Russia.
Yeah, totally out of nowhere.
It's great.
Yep.